Welcome to Bucs Insider, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we got a game to recap, a game to look forward to, and unfortunately the one to recap was not how we hoped it would go, but the creamsicle part of it was pretty great.
Sure
I feel like we got to separate the two things.
Fair enough.
We can talk about what happened on the field, but I want to first talk about the fact that this was our long-awaited creamsicle game. Stadium looked amazing. Jerseys looked amazing.
Fans looked amazing.
Fans looked amazing.
So many of them came in creamsicle.
Oh, it was incredible. I loved it. I mean, look at some of these posts we have. I mean, just everything looked beautiful. And shout out, of course, to our amazing photographers. And
look at that.
It was a beautiful, beautiful day, perfect weather, and the stadium, just the graphics, the whole digital team, the cheerleaders. I mean, it was the whole. That's what I loved, is we didn't just do the jerseys. We also did the whole thing, the stadium. This is funny if people haven't seen this clip, that this is Tristan Wirfs talking to Sewell about, Sewell was saying, hey, let me get that jersey. And for people who don't know, a lot of times players will trade jerseys with each other at the end of the game. You know, they have a bunch from different people, and Tristan's like, nah, man, like, I'm keeping this. There's no way.
I got a story about it. Did you hear Levante when he was talking before the game?
No.
So he's the only one who had played in a creamsicle before on the team, because 2012 was the last game and he's the only one that was on the team then. And they asked him if he kept his jersey. He's like, I was young then, I didn't realize you were allowed to keep your jerseys. So he didn't, and then a couple years later he asked for it. He said they'd already given him away. So he said, this time I'm definitely keeping my jersey.
I'm so glad he got a chance to be here for it then. That would have been so sad. But yeah, so that all just looked incredible. We loved seeing everybody out on their creamsicle stuff. So now let's get to the less fun part of what happened on the field. We know that, man, the Lions are a great team, but we also know that there was a lot that the Bucs knew they could have done differently or better in that game. It did feel like there were so many missed opportunities that, and I'm sure you can say this about a lot of games, but in this one it just felt like this had gone a little differently, or I think especially about the Baker play, and the fact that Mike was.
Well, we're seeing these missed ones to Trey here. There were two of them, and I know Baker felt disappointed, frustrated by these after the game. He said so several times. The one, though, that really turned things was the tip pass, where Mike Evans was 7 yards behind the defense, and the last defender was looking in the wrong direction. So
there that was.
Yeah. So, and it ends up being an interception and 3 points the other way. It might have been 7 points the other way. You can do this obviously after every loss, and it's cliche. But the long and the short of it is that the Buccaneers had their worst offensive performance of the season, felt frustrated and mad about it afterwards, but also felt like they know what was there and what could have been and what can be fixed and what this offense is capable of doing. So you always feel like a certain way after one game. After the New Orleans Saints game, where he scored more than 20 points on them for the first time that anyone had in more than a year, you felt, wow, this thing's really clicking. We're doing all kinds of different things. There's a lot of variety in this offense. And then after this one, you're like, wow, what's wrong with the offense? Are we doing too much? Should we simplify? And Baker said this week, yesterday, said, no, it's not a matter of simplifying, it's just execution. The play calling's fine. Had we hit a few of those plays, nobody would be talking about the play calling right now.
Right, yeah, that's a very good point. And we saw, again, a couple of those were to Trey Palmer. What do we see about the role? Because, I mean, we've always known Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Those are your guys. But we've seen Trey Palmer's gotten some touchdowns, preseason and regular season. He's made some big plays. So what are we thinking that his role could be in this offense?
I think you're seeing him become more and more the primary third receiver, and you can see that in the snap counts and the targets from the last game. He had 37 offensive snaps, and there weren't a ton because the time of possession was so lopsided, so 37 was a lot. I think Devin Tompkins had 14. Trey Palmer had 7 targets to 2 for Devin Tompkins, and this is nothing about Devin Tompkins. I'm just saying it appears to be like Trey Palmer is becoming your obvious third receiver and getting a lot of looks. And it didn't go great. As we saw some of the missed ones, he was targeted 7 times and only caught 2 of them, but those 2 were 2 of the Bucs' 3 plays that went for over 20 yards. So he's a guy that the volume hasn't been huge yet in terms of how many catches he gets per game, but a lot of his plays have been big plays. And as he gets more and more time on the field and more looks, we should see more of that.
Great. And someone else, of course, we saw more of, Calijah Kancey. A guy that, man, I was so excited to see what he was going to look like, because he'd already shown us once this year that he could be injured for a while and come back looking great. That he did that in his 11 snaps against Minnesota after missing a lot of training camp. So then they have to pull him out again. He missed more time. And I was like, is he going to be able to do this again, where he comes back and gets a sack in his first career game that he plays the whole time, and I just feel like he looks like he was ready to hit the ground running, as you know, especially considering he's a rookie and has missed so much time.
I mean, you say that, but he said he was rusty. Coach Bowles,
I will take that if that's him.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Coach Bowles says the same thing. He's got some rust to shake off. He's got some detailed techniques to iron out. But in the time that he's played, and this includes those 11 snaps, 9 of which were pass rush snaps in that Minnesota game, in the time that he's played, of all the defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen in the league, this is the top guys in terms of pressure rate. That's how many times they've pressured the quarterback among their pass rush snaps. That's a really high percentage. I mean, Jalen Carter, everybody's raving about him this year, and Calijah, it's a smaller sample, don't get me wrong.
For sure, yeah.
Jalen Carter has about 4 times as many snaps as Calijah does, but the pressure rate is very promising right off the bat.
And
especially
again, coming off injury, being a rookie, I think that's very fair, even if it is for less snaps.
No, it's an impressive start, and it makes us, you know, kind of optimistic about what's going to happen there with him next to Vita Vea. At some point, defenses are going to have to choose, you know, pick your poison. Who are you going to double team? Probably most of the times you can't double team them both.
Yep. And so we're talking about him bringing pressure. How about Baker Mayfield under pressure? What have we seen from him in this area and just in general? I mean, I already feel like our offensive line has done a really great job in terms of pass protection with him, but we've seen that in the times that he is under pressure, he's really made some impressive plays.
Yeah, and to be more specific, the tackles, Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke, have really done a great job in pass protection. When there's been breakdowns, they've mostly been up the middle, and that's usually the hardest thing for a quarterback to deal with, is that quick pressure right in his face. Baker Mayfield's numbers under pressure this year are kind of insane, and they probably can't last, because league-wide, if you get pressure on the quarterback, it's usually a negative play. Okay, look at this thing. EPA, do you know what EPA is, expected point? It's kind of like WAR in baseball. It's a difficult stat to explain, but basically positive numbers for a quarterback are good if you produce a play that makes it more likely your team will score points. This is total EPA on plays when the quarterback is under pressure.
Wow.
Every quarterback in the league who started at least 2 games. Baker's plus 9.4. To put that in context, Josh Allen is second at 3.4, and they're the only 2 guys over in positive territory. Tua Tagovailoa is having a great season, but even he, under pressure, is a little bit worse than normal.
Right.
That number is insane. I honestly don't think that can last. That's out of bounds. But so far, Baker's been incredible.
Through 5 games, that's pretty incredible. That's amazing. All right, and then now, you know, I know it's easy after a loss to sometimes have a bit of the everything is terrible. Oh my gosh, the sky is falling, Chicken Little situation. But it is really great to still put into perspective where the Bucs are in the division standings at this point. Right. I know that, again, they know they're capable of more than what they've done, but when you look at these division standings here, thankfully everybody else in the division also didn't have a great day on Sunday. That was very handy of everybody. We appreciate it. And so look at where your Bucs sit.
Yeah, you came out of the New Orleans game feeling awesome, 3-1 in first place, had your bye week, came back and unfortunately had that loss, and then you look around and you go, hey, we still, through that whole time, we remained in first place. So there's a big battle coming up this coming Sunday. As you can see, that New Orleans plays tonight, so we'll know, and the Falcons will know whether we're trying to stay ahead of them or whether they've dropped back a little bit. They play the Jaguars, so that game on Sunday could be for sole possession of first place. It will be if the Bucs win, obviously.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. So looking at this Falcons team, you know, it's always interesting to me how a division team is the one you're supposed to be familiar with. You're supposed to kind of know what they do because of how often you play them. It's been different this year, knowing, I mean, even just the fact that every team in the division has a new quarterback. But then you look at the Falcons, not only do they have a new quarterback, but they have Bijan Robinson, the running back. They've got all these new guys on defense, new defensive coordinator. I mean, they just have all this new stuff. So tell us a little bit about what stands out to you about this Falcons team that we'll be facing.
Well, they, and Coach Bowles and a couple of guys were talking about this yesterday. They've added some guys, like you were mentioning, on offense, like Bijan Robinson, obviously Jonnu Smith, the tight end, Hollins, the receiver, Scotty Miller, the former Buccaneer. So they can do a lot more stuff than last year when they were basically the most run-heavy team in the league among teams that didn't have a running quarterback. And this year they still They could do a lot more, but they still run the ball and present heavy sets a lot more often than every other team in the league. And to explain this, but if maybe every listener out there doesn't know, what 11 and 12 and 21 means, that formula is the first number is the number of running backs and the second number is the number of tight ends, and then that's out of 5 because you have 5 eligibles on every play. So the number you don't display in the middle would be the receiver. So 11 would be 1-3-1. Okay, so 11 personnel means 3 receivers, which has become the dominant package in the NFL. Almost every team runs the majority of their plays out of 11 personnel. The Falcons are by far the lowest in that. The next team on the list is 37%.
Wow.
So they don't show a lot of 3 wides. What they do show a lot of is 12 would be 2 tight ends, 21 would be 2 running backs, and 22 would be really heavy, 2 tight ends and 2 running backs and just 1 receiver. If you look at that, that's what, about 70-something% of their plays are out of these heavier packages, and they tend to run most of their run plays to the outside of the tackles. So I was talking to Levante about this, shameless plug on Salty Dogs. Please take a listen.
That's what we're here for, all of our shameless plugs.
We felt it was quite a get to get Levante.
That is a get.
In fact, it was with no warning either. We just found him in the lunchroom and we're like, would you mind?
And of course, Levante will always say yes. Levante is just like the good guy award every year.
It was a great interview. If you don't care about the rest of Salty Dogs, listen to it just to hear Levante talking. But he was talking. I asked him, who are the key defenders when you're talking about a team that runs almost all of their running plays outside the tackles? And he said, me, the linebackers, because they have to diagnose quickly and take the right angles and get to the edge. And as I told him in this interview, I'm like, when I picture a Levante David highlight in my head, I picture him in the Falcons Stadium making those plays where they're diagonal to the outsides of the plays and getting to the guy, knifing through the defense and dropping that guy 2 yards deep. So hopefully we'll have a vintage Levante performance because it's going to be important against this rushing attack.
And man, what a game he had against the Lions. As we talked about some of the things that were the struggles in that game, Levante stacked that stat sheet.
He sure did.
He was everywhere, and it was funny. We had, again, if we want to do another shameless plug, we had Antoine Winfield Jr. on our show this week, and we were asking him about Levante, and he was like, he's so consistent. And he said, and for him to be the kind of consistent he is at this point in his career, because we talked about the fact that typically with players, you either have like the youth on your side for your physical abilities, your speed, your hip mobility, all that stuff, or you've got the savviness of a vet and knowing the game. And he was like, Levante is one of the few people that just somehow seems to have both at the same time.
I'm not going to spoil it because I want people to go listen to it, but he talks about all that exactly.
I love that. It's amazing. Really, Antoine shouted it out, and then Levante gets to explain it.
If you want to hear a player talk about that process,
how to do that,
and how he's still playing so well in his 12th season, please go listen to that interview. It's really good. That's amazing. I love that. All right, and then we'll close with this. Our rookies went to Moffitt. I just always love highlighting this stuff, all the different community efforts that everybody does, and they visited with a lot of the patients over there, which is just so great. And, you know, after recent years, there was a lot of times with COVID that they couldn't actually visit patients very well, and it is so nice to see them back over there at Moffitt, getting a chance to say hi to all these people. And our rookies are such a great group and just had so much fun with everybody, and they're playing games with all the kids, and I just love that it's always good to keep in perspective after a loss that there is still so much that this team is doing in the community and how much joy they're bringing a lot of these people. And so I just think that's a lovely thing to keep in mind, and look how fun our rookie class is. I know, right? I was like, I think we need to throw him out there with we should have thrown him out there with the swashbucklers last game, put on some moves. Now we know why he's a good pass rusher. You know, he's got moves. Yeah, he's got moves. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider presented by Ticketmaster. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.